Hello everyone, Chopped here. I want to thank you all for all the support you've shown me this week. My channel is a whopping 1 week old, and I thought I would do something different today. Why so few people live in northern Florida? Uh, yeah, the northern Florida is definitely a lot different than the rest of Florida, and that's where I live. So I'm really interested to see what he has to say. So let's dive in.
Every state in the country has a unique geography, but one definitely stands out. Florida, with its unique peninsula shape, tropical climate, low-lying elevation, and limestone earth, makes it stand out from the rest of the country. This has led to the establishment of many major cities in the state, but not really in all of Florida. In fact, northern Florida has only 18% of the state's population.
This is very true. Most of the Florida Panhandle is state forest.
Or about 3.9 million people. So why do so few Americans live in Florida's empty north? The farther south you go, the more north you get is a common refrain when talking about the state of Florida.
That is very true. Northern Florida is more like Alabama or Georgia. So, depending on who you are, I guess that's a good thing or a bad thing. Personally, I think it's a great thing.
And it's true. As you travel southward, the state gets much more densely populated, which leaves the northern panhandle feeling much more like Alabama and the southern peninsula feeling a bit like northeast cities,
That's exactly what I
albeit
said.
with better weather. And today, we're going to find out how that happened. Speaking of weather, have you ever wondered what state has the absolute best geography? Well then, head on over to Patreon and learn all about how I'm pulling together a bunch of data to make an objective top 50 list. Free subscribers can read all about the process. Paid subscribers will get sneak peeks at the content, and of course, there'll be videos made about this for the channel right here. So join up today. Florida has a surprisingly long history within the United States because, well, it was actually explored by Europeans well before any other region of the country. And of course, prior to the arrival of European settlement, the region was inhabited by indigenous tribes, including the Temecula, Apalachee, Calusa, Tequesta, and many more. Unfortunately, many of these tribes would be wiped out entirely in the coming decades. The arrival of Europeans in the 1500s marked the beginning of drastic change for Florida. In 1513, Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon landed on the east coast, naming the land La Florida in honor of Spain's Easter celebration, Pascua Florida. While his intention was to find the mythical Fountain of Youth, he ended up carving out a large area of the mainland for Spain to colonize. Spain established St. Augustine in 1565, the oldest continuously inhabited European settlement in the continental United States. However, Spanish colonization efforts were met with resistance from indigenous populations, competition from other European powers, including France and Britain, and even the weather itself. The Spanish settlers encountered Florida's powerful hurricanes early on. The storms posed significant challenges, destroying ships, settlements, and crops. In 1559, a massive hurricane struck a Spanish colonization fleet and a newly established Spanish colony at Pensacola,
That's where I live. 1559. Yep.
leading to the abandonment of the settlement and destruction of the fleet. Despite these setbacks, the Spanish persisted, using their knowledge of the region's weather patterns to adapt their building techniques and agricultural practices. During the 1600s and 1700s, Florida became a contested territory. In fact, the British would establish the colony of Georgia exclusively as a border colony to separate the wealthy colonies of Virginia and the Carolinas from the Spanish in Florida. Over the decades, the Spanish and British vied for control, with the latter briefly taking possession of Florida in 1763. British control was short-lived, however, and Spain regained the territory in 1783. The early 1800s brought significant changes to Florida. The United States acquired the territory from Spain in 1821 through the Adam-Onis Treaty after Spain had given up on funding the colony. American settlers began moving into the region, bringing with them new agricultural practices and establishing plantations. The presence of Seminole tribes who had migrated into Florida during the 1700s led to conflicts as settlers encroached on their lands. These tensions culminated in the Seminole Wars, a series of conflicts that lasted from 1817 to 1858. On March 3, 1845, Florida was admitted to the Union.
There is so much history in Florida, and I've lived here most of my life. I mean, I was born in Alabama, and I've lived all over the South. I've lived in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida, and I've lived in several cities in several of those states. And there's just so much history here, and I know about a lot about it, but there's a whole lot that I don't know about it. It's very complicated and extensive. Anyway, let's keep going here.
3rd, 1845, Florida was admitted to the Union as the 27th state. Statehood brought new opportunities and challenges, including the expansion of agriculture, particularly the cultivation of cotton and citrus. Florida has always been a unique state within the country, and its history as originating as one of Spain's oldest colonies definitely adds to that. But so too does its very unusual physical geography. But before we get to the geography of Florida, if you're enjoying this video, hit that subscribe button. More fun geography videos are just a single click away.
And if you like my video, please hit the subscribe button also.
Of all states in the United States, Florida is probably the most recognizable due to its distinctive peninsular shape, separating the Gulf of Mexico from the Atlantic Ocean by way of the Strait of Florida. And it's this exact location that significantly influences the state's physical geography, from its natural resources and climate to the often extreme weather that hits the state regularly. Florida extends approximately 500 miles from north to south and around 460 miles from east to west. But despite being...
I don't think very many people realize how big Florida is. Especially when I watch all these videos of Europeans reacting to other reactors or YouTubers that travel across the country. I mean, so I live like right over here, which is about as far northwest as in Florida as you can get. And the Florida Keys are down here. And if you travel this, you will be in the state of Florida on the road for somewhere between 14 and 15 hours. That's just one state.
Being fairly wide, the state is predominantly low-lying, with the highest point being only 345 feet above sea level at Britton Hill in the Florida Panhandle. The state's extensive...
Yeah, if you want some mountains, this is not the state for you. But we got lots of beaches.
The coastline stretches for about 1,350 miles, which is the longest coastline in the contiguous United States, but behind Alaska when including the entirety of the country. The Atlantic coastal plain dominates the eastern part of Florida, featuring sandy beaches, barrier islands, and dunes that are continually shaped by ocean currents, waves, and tides. This coastal plain is interspersed with lagoons and estuaries, providing critical...
Manatees! I love manatees. I just went and saw some in Wakulla Springs a couple weekends ago.
Habitats for a variety of marine and bird species. The interaction between the land and the Atlantic Ocean influences the development of these coastal features, fostering rich biodiversity and productivity of marine and bird species.
What kind of bird was that?
The interaction between the land and the Atlantic Ocean influences the development of these coastal features, biodiversity, and productive fisheries. On the western side, the Gulf coastal plain is marked by its broad, shallow continental shelf, which extends far into the Gulf of Mexico. This area is characterized by marshes, wetlands, and extensive mangrove forests that thrive in the brackish waters where freshwater from rivers meets the salty sea. These coastal ecosystems are vital for protecting the shoreline from erosion, providing nursery grounds for fish, and supporting a wide array.
Yeah, Florida is practically a country of its on its own. It's so different from one end to the other and from one side to the other. It's really an amazing place. I mean, I have traveled to dozens of places in Florida with my girlfriend in the last 4 years, and they're all so different. And I mean, there's so much to see in just the state of Florida, and you know, I really want to like get out of the South and travel more and travel across the world and travel the rest of the United States.
Array of wildlife. The southern part of the state is known as the Florida Peninsula, a region that is largely flat with occasional rolling hills. The area is home to the Florida Everglades, one of the most unique and iconic ecosystems in the world. The Everglades is a vast, slow-moving river of grass that flows southward from Lake Okeechobee to the Gulf of Mexico.
Now it's in Now it's being invaded by it's for a number of years now. It's being invaded by pythons.
This subtropical wetland is crucial for water filtration, flood control, and habitat provision for countless species, including the endangered American crocodile and the Florida panther. Florida's climate is American crocodile and a vast, slow-moving river of grass that flows southward from Lake Okeechobee to the Gulf of Mexico. This subtropical wetland is crucial for water filtration, flood control, and habitat provision for countless species, including the endangered American crocodile.
The endangered American crocodile, is it still endangered? Because those suckers are everywhere. I don't know how they're endangered. Oh, wait a minute. Wait. I'm sorry. He said endangered American crocodile, not alligator. My bad. We have alligators all over the place. I think crocodiles are saltwater, aren't they? So yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a crocodile.
And the Florida panther. Florida's climate is primarily humid subtropical in the north and central parts,
Primarily humid subtropical. Dude.
transitioning to tropical in the southern regions. The presence of both the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico plays a significant role in moderating temperatures, resulting in mild winters and hot, humid summers. These large bodies of water also contribute.
There's no part of Florida that's not humid. I mean, it's like living in the jungle. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, between the heat and humidity, and our summers are usually, 110, 100 to 120 degrees is not Fahrenheit. 110 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit is not uncommon for the, what do they call that, the heat index.
Contribute to the state's high humidity and frequent thunderstorms, particularly during the summer months. One of the most notable impacts of Florida's geography
I still want to find out why so few people live in northern Florida.
is its susceptibility to hurricanes. The warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean serve as breeding grounds for these powerful storms, which can cause significant damage when they make landfall. Florida's long coastline and low elevation make it particularly vulnerable to storm surges, flooding, and wind damage. The state's geographic position means that it can be affected by hurricanes from both the Gulf and the Atlantic, sometimes experiencing multiple storms in a single season. Finally, much of the state also sits on limestone bedrock, which has given rise to a landscape dotted with sinkholes, springs, and underground rivers. These karst features are formed by the dissolution of limestone by acidic water.
There's more springs in Florida than any other place in the world. And I've been to a few dozen of them, and there's still hundreds more to see. I think there's over 700 springs in Florida.
Creating a complex network of caverns and aquifers that supply fresh water to millions of residents. The Floridan Aquifer, one of the most productive in the world, provides drinking water to much of the state and supports agricultural irrigation. Florida has a very unique geography, to say the very least, and it's this exact geography that has shaped where people live today.
That is
true. The population distribution of Florida is heavily skewed towards the southern half of the state, with the northern portion, particularly the Panhandle, being much less populated.
If you like cities, you like the part in green. If you like the country, you'll like the part in the orange.
And as usual, several geographic, economic, and historic factors have combined to contribute to this disparity, shaping the development and appeal of these areas. The Panhandle of Florida is characterized by a landscape dominated by swamps, mangroves, and wetlands, unlike the sandy beaches that attract.
Okay. I don't know about dominating with mangroves, because, I mean, I know they're probably here on the Panhandle somewhere, but I've never seen them. So I would not say that the Panhandle is dominated with mangroves. Did he say the Panhandle is dominated with mangroves? Here, let me rewind that.
The development and appeal of these areas. The Panhandle of Florida is characterized by a landscape dominated by swamps,
it's not dominated by swamps either. I mean, has this guy ever been here? I mean, yeah, we have swamps, but it's not dominated by them.
Mangroves and wetlands, unlike the sandy beaches that attract millions of tourists and residents to the southern.
Dude, the Panhandle has some of the prettiest beaches in the country, or at least the Emerald Coast does. Okay.
Part of the state, the Panhandle's coastline is less inviting. The marshy and wetland areas, while ecologically very important, do not offer the same recreational opportunities as southern
All right. This is.
beaches. This difference in natural attractions plays a significant role in the lower population density in the northern region. Another factor limiting the population
You don't really get into all the swampy crap until you get over to the Big Bend area part of Florida. Like over towards like Apalachicola and Carabel. I don't know. I'm not completely agreeing with him on this video here.
growth in the Panhandle is the lack of natural harbors and major navigable rivers. Unlike other parts of Florida, where ports and waterways facilitate trade and transportation, such as the major ports in Miami and Tampa, the Panhandle doesn't have significant maritime infrastructure. This limitation historically hindered economic development and reduced the region's attractiveness to settlers and businesses. And being relatively close to the major port at the mouth of the Mississippi River in New Orleans meant that there was never a historic need for an additional major port on the eastern half of the Gulf of Mexico. In contrast, southern Florida benefits from its natural harbors and extensive network of navigable waterways, such as Tampa Bay and Charlotte Harbor in western Florida, and the Miami River connecting to the Port of Miami. These features have fostered robust trade and tourism industries, contributing to the region's economic dynamism and population growth. The presence of these economic drivers has led to the development of major metropolitan areas such as Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, Tampa, St. Petersburg, and Cape Coral, which continue to attract residents
This is a nice place to visit. This is where I'd rather live.
from across the country and around the world. And while not a port city, Orlando also grew off the back of its geography. Originally the home of extensive citrus orchards, which drew in its original population, the city grew dramatically in the early 1900s due to the Florida land boom, a real estate bubble in the 1920s that lured in thousands of more residents. The city would continue to grow due to its recreation industry and proximity to the Kennedy Space Center. But while southern Florida has the largest cities in the state, northern Florida does have its own urban centers, such as Jacksonville. But these cities have not achieved the same level of growth as their southern counterparts. Jacksonville is the largest city in northern Florida and serves as a major economic hub. It has a
Thank God northern Florida has not reached the same whatever as their counterparts.
significant port, a diverse economy, and a vibrant cultural scene. However, despite its status, Jacksonville's metropolitan population is still significantly smaller compared to the metropolitan areas of Miami, Tampa, and Orlando. Jacksonville ranks 4th in terms of metro area population,
But it's bigger than all those other cities. Not population-wise. But I believe Jacksonville is the largest city in Florida.
reflecting the broader trend of population concentration in the southern part of the state. The differences in climate between the northern and southern regions also contribute to population distribution. Northern Florida experiences more temperature variability, with cooler winters compared to the consistently warm and tropical climate of southern Florida.
That's
the
true.
allure of year-round warm weather is a
I actually like that. I like a little bit of cold weather. Not a lot.
strong draw for retirees and those seeking a sun-soaked lifestyle, further tilting the population growth towards the south. Southern Florida also has a similar climate as the Caribbean, Central America, and South America, leading to large quantities of migrants to choose this area to live in. It's for this reason that Miami has earned the honorary title as the capital of Latin America. Today, Florida would be led by the Miami metropolitan area with about 6.1 million people, making it the
That's
8th
too many
largest
people.
metro region in the United States. This would be followed by Tampa with
crazy.
3.2 million, Orlando with 2.7 million, and then Jacksonville with 1.6 million people. Pensacola would be the largest metro area on the Panhandle with about 510,000 people, followed by the state's capital, Tallahassee, with 309,000. But all of this talk of population on the Panhandle raises one question. Why does Florida even own the Panhandle in the first place? Florida's ownership of the Panhandle, rather than it being part of Alabama, is rooted in historic treaties and territorial agreements dating.
So, there's a joke. Okay, everybody knows what if you ask somebody where they live and they say L.A., most people think Los Angeles, right? Well, this part of Florida is also called L.A., Lower Alabama.
back to the early 1800s. The current boundaries were established through a combination of colonial claims, territorial negotiations, and statehood decisions. Initially, the area that includes the Florida Panhandle was part of the Spanish colony of West Florida. The Spanish had control over the region from the late 1700s to the early 1800s. And during this period, the boundaries of West Florida fluctuated due to various treaties and conflicts with European powers. In 1810, settlers in parts of West Florida, dissatisfied with Spanish rule, declared independence and sought annexation by the United States. This led to the U.S. asserting control over the region. The Adams Treaty of 1819 between Spain and the United States officially ceded all of Florida, including the Panhandle, to the U.S. It was this treaty that clearly defined Florida's borders, placing the Panhandle within Florida's territory. When Florida became a U.S. territory in 1821 and later achieved statehood in 1845, the Panhandle remained part of its boundaries as defined by the Adams Treaty. These boundaries were accepted and maintained, solidifying Florida's claim to the region. Alabama, which became a state in 1819, did not challenge these boundaries significantly. The territorial limits set by the Adams-Onís Treaty and subsequent statehood admissions were recognized and respected, leaving the Panhandle as an integral part of Florida. Additionally, at the time of these negotiations, there was little economic and strategic emphasis on the Panhandle region, reducing potential disputes over its ownership. And that's basically it. The Panhandle was written into Florida's establishment as a U.S. territory as part of its treaty with Spain. And while Alabama has been a fully fledged state longer than Florida, it never really pressed the issue over whether it should own the Panhandle during this period of negotiations, something it probably could have done when Florida became its own full-fledged state. And that's all there really is to it. A combination of economic and migration trends favored the southern part of Florida in a way that the North never really had, and the lack of long sandy beaches in the Panhandle certainly didn't help lure additional sun seekers. Florida is a beautiful state, and if you want to show off that beauty in your home, you can by some of these amazing maps on my map store. Check them out and buy one for your home today. It was so much fun exploring Florida with you. If you enjoyed today's...
So, basically, so few people live in northern Florida because people want to live in the cities and geography and all that stuff. But thank you for watching, my friends. Learned a little bit about Florida. Maybe you did too. And please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.